My roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer is not my story time on Instagram. My roommate and I have been living together for 2 years now. Now, I wouldn't call her my best friend, but we are very close. We don't really talk about intimate things, but at the end of the night, she's always there and we usually have dinner together. Not really close to my family, so to me, it's important that she's there every single night. But here's where things get really shitty. Her and I both got boyfriends around the same time. I met my boyfriend through a friend and he is the sweetest, purest thing ever. This man cries at every single movie, but he travels a lot for work, so he's usually not there. Now, my roommate's boyfriend, he's a personal trainer and I'm pretty sure he takes steroids because he's always angry. Should I say aggressive? His behavior became super obnoxious to me right away. As soon as he would come over to the apartment, he would start saying things like, "Babe, your roommate is so hot." Like he would say that about me to my roommate. Of course, she tried to laugh it off, but I know it bothered her. One day, he even started joking about how he was gonna come into my room one night while I was asleep. Obviously, I did not find this funny. That's when I asked him to leave the apartment. He got so mad, he called me a bitch in front of my roommate and slammed a drawer. Do you think my roommate stood up for me? No. Part 2 is up. Roommate's boyfriend keeps harassing me and I don't know how to tell her. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's not me on Instagram. After he called me a bitch and left the apartment, I was terrified. First off, this guy is 6'2" and he's built like a truck. He's like pure muscle. So when he's yelling in my face and slamming drawers, of course I'm terrified. But my roommate does nothing. But it gets worse. 2 hours after he left, he sends me a text message saying, "Fuck you." And then he sends me a picture of him with his tongue out, giving me the middle finger. I got up to show it to my roommate, but that's when she actually asked to talk to me. She sat me down on the couch and she started telling me how he's such a good man, how she's never been able to find anybody like him. Then she asked me if I could just try to get along with him. He even started crying and it broke my heart. So I decided to let it go. But the next time this guy came over, once again he started playing super loud music. I came out of my bedroom because I was trying to work, and I asked him nicely to turn it down. At this point, my roommate was showering, so it was just him and me in the living room. But then he gets up from the couch and walks slowly towards me, looking me up and down. That's when he says, "You wish you had a guy like me." I turned around and tried to walk back to my room, but he grabbed my arm and turned me around. Then he grabbed my face and tried to kiss me. I actually gagged. That's when he said to me that I was just playing and that I actually want him. The whole time he was squeezing my arm so hard, I finally got away and went into my bedroom. And that's when he sent me a picture of his thing. I literally almost died. I walked out and kicked him out again. This time he didn't put up a fuss, but now I don't know how to tell my roommate. What the heck am I gonna do? Found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimers is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I met my boyfriend at the gym. Yeah, I know. Terrible idea. You can say it was lust at first sight. From the moment we saw each other at the gym, we couldn't take our eyes off each other. He came straight up to me at the gym and told me that he really liked me. But I was super shy. He was just some random guy I was meeting at the gym. But he was all about me. He asked me for my number and I said no. He asked me for my Instagram and I said no. For the next 2 weeks, he would come into the gym at exactly the same time I did. I would basically go work out whenever I had my lunch break. So of course, he would show up then. Of course, slowly but surely, he would charm me. He would even bring me lunch. After about 2 weeks, I finally gave him my phone number. That's when he asked me to go have breakfast, which I thought was weird. Should have been the first red flag, right? This was his excuse. He said he worked nights, but that his schedule would change all the time. So this meant that he would sometimes work during the day or at night. It was just random. So we went to breakfast. Here's the second red flag. He asked me if we could have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we lived. We both lived near the gym. Of course, I thought this was strange, but I said sure. He picked me up and the whole time at breakfast, he kept looking at his phone. Part 2 is up. Just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. For our first date, we went to have breakfast 40 minutes away from where we both lived. Again, this was another red flag I ignored. During the breakfast, he was on his phone the entire time, and I called him out on it. I asked him why he invited me to breakfast if he was going to be on his phone all day. That's when he made up this whole sob story about how hard his work life was, how he was always stuck to his phone answering emails and text messages from his boss. And of course I believed it. I mean, I didn't know this guy from anything. After that, he put his phone down and I realized he was the most amazing man I had ever met. A man that can make me laugh is really important to me. And we laughed the entire time. We were telling each other jokes. We talked about family and values. We talked about our favorite foods, countries we wanted to go to, places we had been to. It was the perfect date. We even loved the same type of music, and our favorite movie was the same. So as you can imagine, I completely fell head over heels for this man. But the red flags continued. A week after our first date, he asked me to be his girlfriend. Did I say yes? Of course I did. But this was just another red flag. He began love bombing me and always wanted to be with me. But he never invited me over to his place. Part 3 is up. I just found out my boyfriend has a freaking wife. Disclaimer is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. Every time I'd ask to go over to his place, he would say no. First off, he told me that he had a terrible roommate, that his roommate was noisy and really dirty and the apartment stank. So for that reason, he didn't want me to come over. And of course I said, yeah, that's fine. Here's the fourth red flag that I ignored. He would ask to come over to my apartment at odd hours. Sometimes he wanted to come over at 3 in the morning. Sometimes he wanted to come over super early. And other times he wanted to come over really late. Because I have a 9 to 5 job, I kept saying no. I needed to get my beauty sleep, please. But even if I said no, he would still come over. Here's the 5th red flag. He would come over to my apartment and instantly fall asleep on the couch. I was always asking him why he was so tired. He would just say that it was too much work. Well, we've been dating now for 2 months. A few days ago, I started getting suspicious of his situation. So I showed up to his apartment. But he didn't live there. It was an office building. I asked him to come over and I confronted him. That's when he confessed that he is married and that he's been married for 10 years. But he says that his wife is a nightmare and that he wants to divorce her. What should I do? My husband got my best friend pregnant and now is forcing me to raise the child. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. About a year ago, I started getting suspicious that my husband was having an affair. So naturally, I started investigating. I went through his phone when he was asleep, but I didn't find anything. That's when I realized that I needed to start following him. And when I did is when I found out who he was cheating on me with. Turns out, it was my best friend. My best friend had just gotten a divorce with her husband at the time. And she told me that she was trying to have fun with as many men as she possibly could. I just never thought it would occur to her to sleep with my husband. For a full week, I followed my husband and he would see my best friend every single day. Sometimes they would meet up at her house since her husband left her the house. Sometimes they would end up at cheap motels. Of course, I started taking pictures on my iPhone to keep track of everything in case I needed to get a divorce. Come to find out, she was pregnant with twins. Part 2 is husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After realizing that my husband was cheating on me with my best friend, I confronted him and her together. I pretended I was having a little dinner party and I invited her over. Really did make a nice dinner though. They did not suspect a thing. Comes into the house and gives me a big hug. Right then and there, I hand her my phone so that she could see all of the pictures I took of her and my husband making out outside of motels. Then she looks at my husband and says, "What did you say?" What did you say? He didn't even bother to look me in the face. Handed me back my phone and simply left the house. Then I'm left alone with my husband. Start confronting him and then he tells me that he made a mistake and that he was just bored with our relationship and that he loved me. He manipulated me so much that night that I ended up forgiving him. He promised he would never see my best friend again. And guess what? My bestie kept looking for my husband. One night she came over and told me that she needed to see him. I did not let her into the house and she started yelling. That's when she finally says I'm pregnant with twins. Apparently she had been pregnant for 3 months and didn't tell anybody. And my husband was happy about it. That's when he asked me if I would be willing to raise the kids. Part 3 is up. My husband got my best friend pregnant and is now forcing me to raise the kids. Disclaimer, is not my story time. After she told us that she was 3 months pregnant, my husband was so happy. He told her that he would take care of everything and not to worry about the medical bills. As soon as my best friend left our house, my husband turns to me and says, "You and I are gonna raise those kids without her." That's when I said he was crazy. I was not about to raise the kid that he had with my best friend. That's when he said that if I didn't, he would divorce me and marry my best friend. But I do have to say, I am still madly in love with my husband. We've only been together for 3 years. He was my dream man when we got married and he still kind of is my dream man even though he did cheat on me with my best friend. When he threatened me with that, I said okay. The next 6 months, my best friend moved into our house while she was pregnant. My husband and I served her hand and foot. And in some weird way, my best friend and I became best friends again, even though she was having my husband's babies. Also turns out that she was having twins. During the pregnancy, my husband told her that she could stay to live with us and we could all raise the kids together. To be honest, I didn't mind the idea. My husband's real plan was to try to get rid of her, so that we could move away and she wouldn't be able to find us. But my best friend was looking forward to having her babies. Once she gave birth, my husband decided to bring her back to our house with the babies. Exactly a week later, he kicked her out of our house. And he offered her $50,000 to give the babies to us. And she agreed. So now I'm stuck raising the twins by myself. My husband is always away for work. My best friend never even comes around to look at her kids. My husband told me that he doesn't think we should have our own kids. He also promised he wouldn't cheat again, but I don't know what to believe. What should I do? Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. Growing up, I was really awkward. My parents always used to call me the ugly duckling, but my dad told me not to worry that when I would grow up, I would become beautiful. Honestly, this really stuck to my head, and I am very beautiful now. I used to have braces, acne. My hair has always been curly, but I didn't know how to treat it back then. My mom had really straight hair, so she had no idea how to do my hair either. And this was the toughest thing for me. I would show up to school with knots in my hair because I didn't even know how to brush it. Eventually, my mom did start taking better care of my hair, which really helped. I also didn't know how to dress for my body. I wore big hoodies, big t-shirts, while the other girls in my high school dressed for their body type. I honestly just had no clue. I did get bullied, but mostly by boys. I think the girls probably just felt bad for me, so I never really had problems with other girls. A group of boys would always bother me. One of them even asked me out pretending that he wanted to go out with me. Of course I said yes because I actually believed him. He asked me to go to the movies, and when I showed up, he wasn't there. I decided to go watch the movie anyway, but the next day in school, I couldn't hear the end of it. To my face, this guy called me stupid. A few days later, they made a list of the ugliest girls. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimer, is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when the boys came out with the list of the ugliest girls in high school. What they did was pass around some flyers with all the names on it, and then they had people write the #1 ugliest girl on the list. As soon as I saw my name on the list, I wanted to die. I pretended I was sick and went home. There was this one girl who actually stood up for me and the rest of the girls, and she was actually one of the prettiest girls in the entire school. She told everyone to knock it off, but nobody listened to her. Instead, the boys added her to the list as well, but there was no way that she was going to get voted number 1. I would show up every day to school that week wishing that I was dead. Finally, on Friday, they came out with the winner. And of course, everyone picked me. I was completely mortified, but I actually started laughing when I saw the list. It was like the stress from the entire week had finally accumulated, and my reaction was to just laugh. While they were all hoping that I was just going to break down and cry, I started to laugh in their faces. The teacher asked me what was wrong and I showed her the list. She ran over to the principal's office and everything became way too dramatic for me. So I literally decided to run away from school. When I got home, I told my parents everything. Part 3 is up. Time about how I was voted the ugliest girl in high school. Disclaimers not my story time on Instagram. When I got home and told my parents what happened, my dad actually started to cry. He actually did feel really bad for me. They sat me down and told me that looks weren't everything. That's when my dad told me again that I would grow out of this awkward phase. Then they decided to take me shopping to the mall. I went into this really cute clothing store that I had always wanted to go to but never had the courage to, and they actually bought me a full wardrobe. After that, that's when my mom took me to a salon and they actually did my hair. They gave me a whole hair care routine, which I had never even heard of before, and I even went and got some Noxzema, which actually the Noxzema really worked for my acne. So when I got back to school, I felt like a different person, but not really because I was still me. The principal had gone out of her way to make all the boys pay, but really they only got suspension and didn't go to school for a week. The rest of high school was actually not that bad. I did look a lot better. 5 years later, I'm absolutely gorgeous. And guess what? One of the boys who bullied me actually slipped into my DMs last week. What should I say? Storytime about how I stole my sister's boyfriend and don't regret it. Disclaimers not my storytime and send me on Instagram. When I walked in on my boyfriend and my sister hugging, I knew I had to do something. I went straight to my parents and told them what she was doing. My dad pulled her into her room and talked to her, but she totally denied everything. She said that she was not flirting with my boyfriend, but we all knew that was a lie. Even my boyfriend was honest with me and told me that she had been flirting with him openly. That's when my boyfriend told me he didn't even want to come over to our house because my sister made him that uncomfortable. And when I told my parents this, they felt so embarrassed. They called my boyfriend and personally apologized to him. He was actually so sweet though. He would come visit me to my house and we would just chill out in his car while my sister was inside watching us through the window. Yeah, she was crazy. He and I eventually broke up because he went off to live in another country. And guess what? My sister said that she knew he never loved me and that's why he left me. She was being so mean at the time. A few years later, she started dating someone. Of course, at the time, it never occurred to me to even flirt with him or act the way that she did with my boyfriend. You see, I'm above all that. But as soon as I got a new boyfriend, she would start flirting with him. And she had no shame about it. This became a running problem in my family. My parents would ask her to leave me alone and my boyfriends, and she would say that she did. But no, she didn't. Oh yeah, and her boyfriend broke up with her because he noticed that she would flirt with a lot of guys. Apparently, she did it even in front of him. So when she finally got a new boyfriend, I decided that I was gonna do the same thing to her. I started flirting with her boyfriend a little. Not a lot, but I definitely made sure to tell him I thought he was attractive. After a few weeks, he started saying things back to me, and I knew that it was working. I never did it in front of my sisters and my parents because I didn't want them to get mad at me. So instead, I got her boyfriend to basically fall in love with me. I already knew everything about him because my sister would tell me, so I just started telling him I liked the same things he did. It got to the point where one day he kissed me and I didn't tell my parents. I made sure to get his hopes up. Part 3 is up. I got my sister's boyfriend to fall in love with me, her life turned to misery. No, I didn't regret it. Disclaimers is not my story time with me on Instagram. One day I went up to my sister and told her that her boyfriend had kissed me. First she thought I was making it up to make her jealous. Told me I could never compete with her and that she was the more beautiful sister out of the two of us. Which is wrong. So I handed her my phone so that she could see all the messages that her boyfriend and I had been sending each other. And that's when she lost it. She started wailing on me. She started slapping and kicking me. My parents ran into her room and asked her what was wrong. I told my parents that I treated my sister the way she treated me. She would always go after my boyfriends, flirt with them, and try to get them to break up with me. Of course my parents didn't agree with me, so they were really angry. They separated us, but my sister went crazy. She called her boyfriend and told him to come over. Obviously, he didn't know that she already knew at the time. And when he came over, she started beating him up. She grabbed a pan from the kitchen and started swinging at him. She actually ended up giving him a concussion. After that, she begged for his forgiveness, but he still broke up with her. At the end of the day, he ended up leaving her. She was so stupid for begging him to stay with her. Her boyfriend even asked me if we could be together, and I told him no. I told him that the whole time I had just been playing him just to get back at my sister. Which I know is so cruel, but he deserved it. After that, my sister and I decided to make peace. She told me that she wouldn't mess with my boyfriends anymore and that she would stop being evil. But after a month of having my new boyfriend, I found her flirting with him too. I told her if she didn't stop that I would make her life miserable once again. I'm pretty sure she has a boyfriend, but she doesn't want to tell my family. Cause she knows that I'll go after him and I would probably end up making him fall in love with me too. But at this point, I just don't know what to do. What should I do? She's so evil and I want to make her life miserable. Bye.